Welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. With me behind that goatee gentleman there is Chris Korman. He's the sports editor of the Baltimore Banner.com. We're going to be talking to Chris in just a minute. Let me get a little business out of the way first with a question. What company has the expertise, technology to make your home substantially more energy efficient, comfortable, and even virus-free? That would be AJ Michaels Heating and Air Conditioning in Baltimore and Annapolis at ajmichaels.com. And then, of course, Superbook Sports is one of our very fine sponsors. And if you use the promo code StanCharles23, Chris Korman wishes he had a promo code like this.
I do.
Use that promo code of StanCharles23. You can get $250 based on their first bet bonus. Win or lose, they will match your first bet up to $250 with the promo code StanCharles23, all one word with no spaces. That's superbooksports.com. They are the most trusted name in Vegas sports books. So there you have that. All right, we'll tell you a little bit about the Costas Inn down the road. But first, I want to welcome in the sports editor of the Baltimore Banner, and that's Chris Korman. Chris, welcome to the show. And I know you've been here, about 14 months, is it? 13 months?
Yeah, the Banner, the Banner itself launched in June of, 2022.
June 14th, 2022.
Yeah, and sports did not get going until a little bit later. I was hired in October, and then it took us a while to hire writers. We actually just completed our staff in the beginning of October. We finalized our assistant editor hire. So we've been slowly building and trying to provide good coverage of Baltimore sports. We know fans here are passionate.
I want to dig into some things, how you're covering sports.
Sure.
and the online nature of what you do, the nonprofit way of doing business. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about yourself. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about your background? Because I know you were at the Baltimore Sun for a couple of years, but you're not from Baltimore originally.
Yeah, no, I came to the Baltimore Sun in 2010. Prior to that, I went to undergrad at Penn State, did my graduate degree at Columbia, worked at Sports Illustrated briefly. I moved to Bloomington, Indiana to cover Indiana sports, Indiana basketball.
Were you covering it when Bobby Knight was still there, or he had gone?
I took over when Mike Davis actually left.
Okay,
they just fired Mike Davis and they hired Kelvin Sampson. So I was there for 4 years before coming to the Sun. After the Sun, I went to USA Today. I helped launch an NFL site there, and then eventually went to For the Win, which just covers all sports and culture. And I was the features editor there, wrote a lot of columns, covered all sorts of things, Super Bowls, Final Four. I've covered horse racing before, so I was the Triple Crown writer for the Sun after I did an editing stint there. So that's my background. My father is originally from Baltimore. We used to come down here a lot. I went to a game the first year at Camden Yards when I was 10 or 11 or whatever it was. Him and I argued incessantly about whether Brooks Robinson or Mike Schmidt was the better third baseman, because I grew up a Phillies fan. So I certainly had Baltimore as part of my childhood.
I'm a guy who loved Brooks Robinson. But I have to admit, I kind of discovered in my group of friends, I kind of discovered Mike Schmidt the year he hit like 176, because I was parking cars in Atlantic City.
Okay.
And we go over to watch the Phillies, and I said, they got this guy that's going to be really great. And I think he is the best third baseman. I don't want to get you into an unpopular zone, but to me, I think the totality of what Schmidt accomplished far surpassed Brooks, because he was a great fielder as well. But off the field, there's nobody's close to Brooks Robinson.
No, I mean I always tell this story. I coach Little League baseball and I help run the league.
By the way, Chris, you realize everybody's turned off now. Everybody clicked off.
They just left. They're out. I helped run this league, Cockeysville Rec, and one of the years we were trying to raise money, and so the people at Robbie's First Base gave us some things to auction off, and we had a bunch of Brooks Robinson stuff, and I was at the table and I kept saying like, man, so many people are going to bid on this, and nobody bid on it. And so I went around and asked, and they said, "Oh, we all have Brooks's autograph. Like he
Right.
we see him around and he signs stuff.
If you don't have a Brooks Robinson autograph, you didn't ask him.
Right? Yeah,
that's the way it was.
So.
Hey, I know you went to Penn State undergraduate,
yep.
and then you went to Columbia, the graduate school of journalism there. Was that preparing for maybe a professorial stint, or what does the graduate school get you prepared to do that you wouldn't know how to do now?
Yeah. Columbia, the program is very short. It's just 10 months and it's very pragmatic. So there's not much classroom time. You're really out reporting. So I covered a neighborhood in the Bronx. I went up and found the high school football team, and it was these kids who, they were the coaches had to give them subway cards to get them to and from practice. They would go to McDonald's after practice to get the leftover apple pies, because some of the kids wouldn't eat for days. And so they would bring these apple pies. So really I went for that experience. I went to cover something different. I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to college in central Pennsylvania, just sort of felt like I needed to escape my comfort zone a little bit and go see some other things.
And was sports always your thing? That's what you wanted to focus on?
Yeah. At Penn State, I obviously went there to cover Joe Paterno and see what that was about. I learned pretty quickly just how much of a business college sports is. I went with wide eyes, thinking, I was a fan. I grew up watching LeVar Arrington and Kerry Collins. But I quickly realized just from covering football just how big of a business it was, and I think back then it was a lot more shrouded. Now there's the NIL and we talk about recruiting in such an open way, but back then it was really, most people didn't see that side of it. It was really presented as a sport that happened to involve student athletes. But I saw right away that those student athletes were spending 50, 60 hours being athletes and having trouble being students. So it was a great learning experience just to be
Chris,
there.
were you saddened by, I know you did your undergraduate work, so you're not from Happy Valley, but were you saddened to see what happened at the end there to Joe?
Yeah, I mean, it was tragic, and it was I wrote at the time, and eventually ended up, ESPN called. It's like, you got to come on the air and say this. But I wrote that I don't think it was that surprising if you were there.
Yeah.
Because at the end, by the last 10 years of Paterno's tenure, I think he was so focused on trying to win again that he lost some of the ability to run the program the way he wanted. And there was, we were covering a lot of crimes and a lot of things, players getting in trouble and players not doing well in school, and all the things that were supposed to be a hallmark of his program had gone away. So, I think it's just it's a tragic story. It's just too much power. It's not a news story. It's one that's happened many other places and many places since.
I'm far from an investigative reporter, as you'll get to know, but I always wondered why his right-hand man, Jerry Sandusky, never was going anywhere else. And it was very odd to me.
Right.
And I certainly didn't think, hey, he likes little boys or something like that. But it struck me as odd. And then when it came out, it's sort of like he had created his own little world there,
100%.
Where he could do what he wanted to do.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly, it's when you really study it, the deviousness of it is shocking, because he really, he had started he made it so that when he stepped away, and he stepped away at a weird time, they had, the 99 defense was incredible. And then he left, but he had made it so that it seemed to make sense, because, I'm going to the second mile. And we know how that went. So.
Yeah. We're talking with Chris Korman. He's the sports editor of the Baltimore Banner. I want to talk to you about the Banner, doing a little bit of research before I grab you. And I see that in June this year, it was announced that you basically have 70,000 subscribers of varying
Yep.
amounts
Right.
of money. And the goal initially had been by 2025 to have 100,000 subscribers. I want to ask you this. It's interesting that you said you didn't start off with sports at the Banner. I mean, in other
Right.
words, the entity didn't have sports. What do you take some pride in that 70,000 figure, in that you've helped accomplish that because of the coverage that you've given it, the sports teams here?
Yeah, I certainly do. And I think that number is up to 80,000 now,
Okay, good.
somewhere around there. Certainly it's gone up with particularly the Orioles coverage. You know, the Orioles coverage, the team being as good and as interesting, and our staff being as talented as they are, certainly added some numbers. But I think they realized, you know, they launched, and a lot of nonprofits are in a different space. They're not covering sports as much. There's one in Memphis that covers the city and also added sports later on and has done very well. But a lot of the nonprofits, the Texas Tribune, ProPublica, there's not really.
There might be a smattering of it.
Yeah, but they're not. So I think they added us later, and they realized, like, yeah, you know, Baltimore's a sports town. And these people want their new. You know, I think there's a hunger for great news in this town, and for, you know, we all know what's happened to the Sun. I work there. I love the Sun. What's happening has nothing to do with the journalists or the people here in town. It's a far-flung ownership group that's killing it.
Yep.
And so we knew, and I had friends who helped make the Banner happen. Really, I mean, it's former Sun staffers that recruited Stuart Bainham to make this happen. And we talked, and we knew that there was a huge appetite for better journalism, for well-resourced journalism. And then I think the leaders realized, like, well, people are also going to want some sports news, you know, and it's important. And it's a huge civic thing here too, right? There's $1.2 billion sitting on the table for the two sports teams to use. It's an important story too.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Do you think your coverage led to numbers, or the team playing well this summer? Or was it a confluence of both?
That's I don't want to take away our Orioles staff. First of all, is incredible. You know, we hired Andy Koska from the Sun, somebody that I've been following since he was at University of Maryland, just a supremely talented journalist. Danielle Allen Tuck came over in the middle of the season. She was covering the Rockies for a paper in Colorado. She worked at the New York Times previously. And then we have John Mioli writing columns, who worked at the Sun.
John's really terrific.
Yeah, John's fantastic. So, you know, that team is incredible. But you know, I think it was just it was a happy confluence of things, because in spring training, I think we started writing every day, and the readers weren't really sure who we were, and Google search wasn't sure who we were, and the Orioles fans on Twitter weren't sure, you know, what is this Banner thing? And then we had some pretty good stories. We did great story on Adley Rutschman, sort of what his winter was like, Gunnar Henderson, some deep dives. We had a great Grayson Rodriguez feature. And that started the momentum going. And then we broke the news that Grayson had been sent down originally, you know, that we just broke some stories that stood out. And then the team, you know, it was so good. I remember thinking, like, 2-3 weeks in, like, this is a nice start. They're gonna level off. Like, they're gonna regress. And then they never did.
They never regressed.
No. And so our readership just kept going up and up and up and up. It was a truly magical season. I know people use that word about the Orioles all the time, but it was truly magical.
Now, it's interesting. They've ended, and sort of maybe you got a vacuum, and now all of a sudden the Ravens are playing up to what we hope they could be.
Right.
Are you sensing that people are really grabbing on to reading about them?
Yeah, you know, I'm interested in your thought on this, because you've observed this fan base for much longer than I have. I feel that there's, like, still a sense of trepidation about the Ravens. I think people are happy that they're good. And they're better than I imagined. I mean, I'm very impressed by what's going on the defense is incredible, first of all, without having really.
That's what's so interesting this year. They spent all the money on the offensive side of the ball, paying Lamar finally, and we were all worried that the defense was going to take a hit, and the defense has been really absolutely tremendous.
Right. Just incredible. I mean, what a coaching job, and just veterans, Stephen Clowney and Van Noy, like two guys who just pros, they just come in and do the job. And the offense, Monken's offense has been, I think, as advertised, it's so diverse. But I think fans are just waiting to see, right? They're waiting to
I
see if
think
they
they're
can
waiting for
finish.
Lamar to see if the other shoe drops or whether
Right.
he can really carry it through. Tell us
Yep.
who I know it's Jonas Schaefer.
Yep.
Tell us where I mean, he was at the Sun, right?
Yeah, yeah, Jonas. I've known Jonas since he was an intern at the Sun. Then he got hired full time and worked his way up there. So we brought him over immediately. I think Jonas is one of the most interesting NFL beat writers in the country. And that was one of my jobs at USA Today. Was I sort of read what everyone else was writing. So I was lucky enough to see Jonas grow into that. And then we had hired Chris Rim originally, who was coming off a New York Times fellowship, and ESPN hired him away after
Okay.
a month and a half. He's now covering the Chargers for ESPN. So we hired Gianna Hahn, who had been covering the Philadelphia Flyers for the Inquirer. She's from Howard County, and knows the area and really wanted to get back home and cover a team here. And then we have Kyle Goon, who's also from Howard County. He was covering the Lakers previously, and he's come in as our columnist. So those three are spending a lot of time out there.
Let me ask you a question. You're a quote unquote a nonprofit.
Right.
The Athletic is clearly for profit.
Sure.
They have stories that can run 8,000 words.
Right.
I guess part of it is that online you don't have to really pay for paper
Sure.
and ink. Do you still try to adhere toward more shorter stuff? Is shorter better online?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see that the vast majority of things read online are short, and that we know we have data now that shows, like, okay, a user came and they scrolled once, and honestly, most people don't even scroll once. They look at the headline, they read the first couple of sentences, and that's enough news for them. I just tell our people, whatever a story is worth, as long as it's still interesting. And we have run one of our most read Orioles stories was about Yennier Cano and his journey to the majors, which was crazy. He had when he was in Cuba, and he was in sort of a remote area and no one noticed him.
Yeah.
And then once he finally got noticed a little bit, somebody said, "Hey, you should go play in America." And he said, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." And the Cuban government banned him from baseball fields for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Even he would try to go walk onto a field and practice, and police would show up. They were monitoring that much, and so he eventually had to work his way here. And then, as we know, he was not.
He was a throw-in the Jorge Lopez deal.
Right. The Twins didn't think much of him, and then went for what he did when he came over. The Orioles didn't think much of him. They just sort of called him up because he was a fresh arm early in the season, and then he turns into this crazy story. And I think we ran that at probably 5,000 words, and most of the people who read it read every single word because it was a great story. But a lot of the stuff we're doing day to day just needs 400, 500 words.
Answer me a question. John Mioli is clearly a new generation of writer,
Sure.
and his tact, he writes in a language that I can't totally understand. I intuitively understand it.
Sure.
I know it's not the newspaper's job to educate people, of what the R plus WC stands. Where do you fall on that? Do you take that approach? Hey, it's not, John, keep doing it because it's the new language.
I literally had a conversation with my assistant editor about this at 6:15 tonight, because I kind of think probably it is our duty, and that we should have John write a primer about the baseball stats, and Jonas should write one about football stats, and we should point people to where these things are, because really once they end up having scarier names than they need to, right? There's this football stat CPOE, and it's just completion percentage over expected. And so a couple of computer people just took, they looked at all these throws, and they figured out that if a throw is here, it's probably going to be complete. And
Right.
if the defense, they just did the math, and now they can say wherever a ball is, whether or not it should be completed, and they can,
Right.
because we know
It's kind of like the defensive metrics in baseball of the
Right.
percentage of a chance that the outfielder is going to make a play.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up watching the Eagles and like Randall Cunningham, like, oh, he doesn't have a great completion percentage. But I could sit there as a kid and be like, well, yeah, his wide receivers are terrible. Like
Right.
he doesn't like Joe Montana has a great completion percentage because he's throwing to Jerry Rice and Jerry Rice is catching everything no matter where it goes. The Eagles have never had someone like that. So this just, all these stats take into account things that I think, as you said, like we as fans intuit, we
Yeah.
know these things. This is just a mathematical way to put them on paper.
Yeah.
But I do think we need to do a better job of explaining to people what these stats are and why we're using them, why we
I
think
guess
they're
the one
important.
thing is, though, you're online, so you can make an assumption that a lot of your people are younger demographic and probably are picking it up. But for me, I'm in my 70s now. It's amazing. It's like if I'm suddenly wanting to go out and take a lesson in German or something like that. It would be
Yeah.
very embarrassing. Hey, I've got to pay one more bill, but then I want to talk to you a little bit about one of the big elephant in the room right now, which is gambling,
Sure.
sports gambling. I want to talk about your thoughts on that and how you plan to cover it.
Sure.
We're going to continue with Chris Korman, but first I got to tell you about a place that's never a gamble to go to, and that's the Costas Inn, located at 4100 North Point Boulevard. The Costas family has been sponsoring my radio shows, my commentaries, and press box since 1995. So that's about 28 years, and they've been in business almost double that, over 50 years at the same location. If you want steamed crabs that are great crab soup, crab cakes, it's all there for you. Check out the menu, CostasInn.com. You can also order online. You don't even have to get out of your car when you show up. You can pay for it online and pick it up without going in. But if you do go in, you're going to be treated like amazingly because it's a family atmosphere, bunch of TVs on the wall, and specials every night, Monday through Friday. The Costas Inn, 410-477-1975. All right, back to Chris. Chris, I used to be what I would call a compulsive gambler back in my late teens. I started out as a racehorse. I lived around the corner from Pimlico Racetrack.
Makes sense.
And then when I got on the air, I was mainly a baseball guy, so it wasn't that pressing. But I always talked about how I was a gambling addict. And now I'm 70. I do bet on professional sports and college sports a little bit. Where do you stand on this? Is this a healthy thing that gambling has been embraced now by everybody that kept it at arm's length for so long?
Wow, that's a big question. So at the Sun, when I was covering horse racing, in the off season, I covered gambling.
Did you work with Ordine there, Bill Ordine?
He had
left,
but we covered some of the same. We were at like the lottery commission meetings together when they were. I was there when they were awarding gambling licenses. And so I got to know a lot of gambling addiction experts, people who worked in that field, and they said, this is going to add a fair amount of 10% more people if they have access to casinos. They're 10% more are going to fall to that addiction, just because it's nearby now. But the thing they said even then was that they worried about young people, particularly young males, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old college age males just lacked the ability. Their brains literally lacked the maturity to properly process this. The dopamine.
It's ironic. That's exactly who they're aiming for now.
Right. The dopamine hit of, I want to bet I'm going to win many more. Was so strong for them. And so then I covered the explosion of daily fantasy. Daily fantasy sports really was the the entryway into, I think, sports gambling becoming more accepted. And so they were very concerned about that. And I haven't seen what the numbers are. I mean, I assume that there has been a corresponding uptick in people having trouble. And I tried to report a couple of those stories. I was going to fly. I was one night away from flying to Vegas to meet some people who had lost a ton of money, and then they backed out, because it's an incredibly embarrassing thing to admit. It takes a lot of strength to admit that you suffer through this addiction. So I'm sure that we don't understand the societal costs, but there's also, these things were happening before, and now the money is at least getting taxed and going to, in Maryland, the gambling money goes to schools or racetracks.
In your estimation, does the fact that there is an embrace between the sports and the gaming concerns, does that make it less likely that we're going to get a fixed Super Bowl or college basketball games? Do you think the security is more stringent today?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that the athletes are already rich, right? When a lot of these scandals happen, it's because an athlete would have to be working at UPS, or whatever.
They were afraid when Willie Mays wanted to shake hands in front of the casinos in Atlantic City, him and Mantle. Yeah.
Right. They had to work, they weren't getting, I mean, now athletes are making a fair amount of money. Now, I think college athletes, there's a lot of danger there. And then the NFL, most, what I think people sometimes forget is that most of the NFL is making good money, but not life altering money. Not like I can now live for the rest of the time and pass money on to my kids. Like most of them, as the stats
and an awful lot of those players haven't been brought up with the respect for money.
Yeah,
it sounds like a racial thing, but it's really, they don't come from backgrounds where there was a lot of money to wonder how to invest it, put it away, so a lot of players.
And they have many people they want to help, right? They get $2 million and they have 15 people that they want to make their lives better, and that money's gone pretty quick. So I think that's probably really the biggest thing. I don't, whether or not you can trust the leagues to police these things. I don't, probably not. Generally,
it's been fascinating to me that we've had more of a spate of suspended NFL players in the last 2 seasons than I recall for 20 seasons. Before. So let me ask you, as we get ready to close this, how's the Banner going to handle betting? Is there going to be a guy doing a column on betting?
Yeah, the only reason we haven't yet is that I think it's not necessarily a local thing, right? Like if you're really a sports gambler, you're looking for the best.
That's
whatever.
A good point.
It doesn't matter if it's, if you have to bet on the Sacramento Kings, you're just looking for the best deal. It's not, you're not going to make any money as a gambler if you're only gambling on your favorite teams. If you're just, so I think it would be a little far afield for us right now. We're young, we're still growing. We need to cover local college sports more, local high school sports. I want to get into those areas, but I do think at some point we'd have people writing about gambling, and certainly we would cover sort of issues related to it here in Maryland. If it explodes, if they keep opening sports books, depending on where they open them. I think it's a news story for us. It's an important thing for us to be aware of, but I don't think we'll cover it quite yet.
Chris, one other last topic that I sort of forgot was the explosion of the interest in sports business.
Yeah.
And when the business story comes up, like the lease agreement between the Orioles and the governor and the state of Maryland, are your sports people going to do that, or are your news people going to do that?
Yeah, we've had incredible teamwork. It's been, we have a channel in our Slack where we talk this story over, and I think there's 18 people in the Orioles lease, including our Orioles writers, Kyle Goon, myself, and then Pam Wood, our incredible State House reporter, a couple other government writers. We've just had to attack it that way. We don't have. I was actually the sports business reporter at the Sun when I left, and Jeff Barker took over. So the Sun is Jeff Barker. They have Hayes Gardner looking at it, and then I'm sure they're using a lot of different people too. But our approach has been to sort of have a cross-functional team all looking at it. But when we hire I think when you hire a sports reporter now, they better know business, right? Because
Yeah,
I
no
mean,
question about
the story of putting the Ravens together is a business story. The
it. Yeah,
story of the Orioles, like like the next 5 years of the Orioles is, are they going to pay people, right? Like that's,
yeah,
we
yeah,
know they have the core. This
yeah.
core is good enough to win a World Series. The question is, will they give somebody more than $10 million per season to come help that core?
Yeah.
So it's a, so when we hire, we look for people who understand that. You have to now, and it's even with college sports with NIL, and that's really dictating where recruits go. So it's,
I'd,
sports is a business story now.
I'd be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to tell people out there how they can subscribe to the Baltimore Banner.
Yeah, I mean, if you come to our site, the BaltimoreBanner.com, or follow any of our writers on Twitter, you'll see links to our stories. If you haven't subscribed yet, you'll read one story, and the second story you read, you'll hit a paywall. It's $1 to try. I would encourage you just to give us a shot. I think you'll like what you see. I mean, we have a newsroom of 76 people now, so we're covering all sorts of things. We're growing, and I think it's just a wonderful publication that's really, I think it catches the spirit of Baltimore, and it's trying to uplift Baltimore. It's trying to cover stories that will help Baltimore be a better place. So I think you'll really enjoy it. And our sports coverage is really fun. I mean, we just have really, really smart people covering these teams.
They've hired good people. You've
Yeah.
hired good people.
Thank you.
It's a good read. I will tell everybody out there. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, anytime, you let me know.
All right. Chris Korman of the Baltimore Banner. He's the sports editor of the BaltimoreBanner.com. That's going to do it. I'll be back with Luke and Ross Grimsley on Monday night. We'll talk some baseball. And next week, I'll also have John Eisenberg, formerly of the Baltimore Sun, formerly of BaltimoreRavens.com. He's written a new book about the history of black quarterbacks called Rocket Men. And we'll talk to him about that new book. All right. For Chris Korman, I'm Stan the Fan. We thank our sponsors, AJ Michaels Heating and Air Conditioning, and also the Costas Inn, and of course, Superbook Sports. Bye for now.